The zither was a popular music instrument during the 19th century and early 20th century. Zithers made at the Franz Schweitzer Zither Factory in Washington, Missouri were especially popular for their performance and appearance. As the 20th century progressed, the number of zither players in the Washington, Missouri area slowly diminished. In August of 2017, a group of aspiring zither players gathered at the Washington Historical Society to begin zither lessons. By December, they had progressed to the point where they were ready to play before an audience. Their performance at the Washington Historical Society Christmas dinner was very favorably received by the audience. Future concerts are eagerly anticipated as the players progress and expand their skills sets on the zither.
The word zither is a German rendering of a Latin word called zither. And I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's basically applied to any instrument that has many strings stretched across a thin, flat body. The earliest known surviving instrument of that type dates back to 433 BC. It's a Chinese instrument called a kutchen. Now, zithers are played by strumming or picking the strings with fingers or pick, sounding the strings with a bow, or in some cases beating on the strings with a special hammer. Like a guitar, a zither's body serves as a sound box, but unlike a guitar, the zither has no neck assembly. In modern terms, or common usage, the term zither refers to three specific instruments: the concert zither, a variant called the alpine zither, and both of those have a fingerboard, and then a court zither, which is much the same but has no fingerboard. It is just the strings. Now, the alpine zither and the concert zither were very popular in Eastern Europe, in Germany, Austria, and surrounding countries. And as those people immigrated to the United States, they brought those instruments with them. Now, the earliest ones were quite crude instruments and had some limitations as to just how much they could play. But in 1838, a German made some modifications that effectively changed it from a crude instrument to one that could play what we call the concert zither, could play better music. Later, in 1862, there was further advancements to it, and to the point where composers of that time period began to write music for it. One of the Johann Strauss, as I'm sure you're all familiar with, gave it a prominent solo in one of his most famous waltzes, Tales from the Vienna Woods, which I'm sure we've all heard. Well, the zither went through a couple periods of popularity in the United States. Of course, first it was in the late 1800s and early 1900s when we had all the German and Austrian immigrants coming to the country. They brought the instrument with them. It was used in family gatherings. Many families had one when they'd get together for dinner or something. Someone would bring their zither, they'd start playing, they'd sing, they'd dance. The German population worked very hard 6 days a week. On Sunday morning they went to church. On Sunday afternoon they all got together, drank beer, and played the zither. Middle or early 1900s, popularity began to drop off a little bit. But then it got revised again in the 1950s, and I don't know how many of you saw the British film The Third Man, but if you remember the tune from that, that was played exclusively with the zither. Now, concert zither has 5 melody strings along the fretboard, and the melody is played with your left hand on that fretboard. The right hand, actually the left hand just pushes down the strings, and the right thumb plucks the strings, giving you the sound. Now that sounds pretty easy. However, the right hand also has another thing it has to do. These other fingers have got to reach up and strum the strings. Obviously, someone with large right hand could be a much more proficient zither player. But there are normally 37 strings up here that the right fingers are playing with. Now, the zither music is written in both the bass clef and the treble clef. However, if you're a pianist, you know that your right hand plays the treble clef and your left hand plays the bass notes. If the zither, it's just the opposite. Your left hand plays the treble clef and your right hand plays the bass notes. It has a greater range of note range than the piano. The concert zither has a range of 187 separate tones compared to a piano's 88. As you can imagine, it's a challenging instrument. And on your table, there's a brief background on Franz Schwarzer. I'm not going to get into the history of Franz, but he was very famous for his zithers. In 1873, he put zithers into the Vienna, Austria exposition, and he won the gold medal against 30 other zither manufacturers who had been in business for years. Now, in the late 1800s and very early 1900s, there were zither clubs around the United States, but there was no national organization. In 1911, several men got together and they said, let's form a national organization for people to get together and play the zither. They decided to do that, and the plan was to have the first American Zither Congress, and they were going to do that in 1912. That gathering happened on September 2nd, 3rd, and 4th of 1912, and it occurred here in Washington. The very first Zither Congress took place here in Washington. There were zither players from 10 states. They formed an organization that existed for a number of years. In 1913, they played in Davenport, Iowa. In 1914, it was in Cleveland, Ohio. And then World War I came along, and they stopped playing until the war was over. And in 1919, they played again in Washington, Missouri. Now, the organization of the American Zither Congress kind of went down. It lost interest as people lost interest in the zither. But it has continued to stir interest in many, many people. We formed our own local zither club, and I call it a club. It was formed just over 3 months ago. In late August, we had our first meeting. We had a number of individuals that showed up. They all had personal interest in learning to play the zither. They didn't know what they were getting into and the difficulty, but they showed up, but they did not have the idea of being a group or a club. They had personal interests. Today, that group is a tight-knit group. They are trying to decide on a good name for the group. They are going out after additional musicians. They brought in a couple guitar players to support them, and they are looking for other zither players. Now, the first meeting was a result of an individual who had been trying for multiple years to get interest going here in Washington to play zithers. That individual that kept trying is Rich Kruger, who's here with us tonight. And Rich, along with Ann Prince from Davenport, started coming to Washington on their own expense. 4-hour drives. They'd come down almost every Saturday. One or the other of them would be here every Saturday to teach how to play the zither. When the group started, we had no music. Ann provided us with that music. She provided us with techniques of how to play. We have no zithers. And Mark wouldn't let us take the zithers out of display in the museum. Rich solved that problem for us. He loaned us enough zithers so that every one of our students had a zither to practice with, and they took home to learn how to play. I would like to, and then Phyllis Dobbins also came along with Richard, and I would like to have Richard and Phyllis and Ann stand up for just a minute. Thank you very much. We have progressed, I say we, I have a problem with my left hand. It wants to play bass music. But the group has progressed quite a bit in the 3 months that we've been playing. We can thank Rich and Ann and Phyllis for helping us on that. As I said, Rich loaned us enough zithers so every student had a zither. At this point, several of our students have purchased their own. Who has their own zithers now? So we have four of our students have their own zithers. And of course, we're very interested in Schwarzer zithers because Schwarzer zithers were made here in Washington for many, many years. How many of you are playing Schwarzer zithers? These zithers are over 100 years old, and they still play beautifully. We are trying to recruit additional musicians, and if you're interested in the zither, we would be glad to have you come with us. It is a difficult instrument to play, but once you learn, I think you'll find that it's a real pleasure. Now, the group tonight is going to play 3 songs, and I think the first 2 you'll probably recognize, and then I'll have a few comments about the third one. So if you would like to start us off. It's been very difficult for these ladies to learn to play these zithers. They are extremely hard to play. I mentioned before they started playing that in 1912, Washington was host to the first zither gathering in America. I would like to point out to you that in April of next year, 2018, we will have another convention of zither players here in Washington. They will be coming from all over the United States. They will be a 3-day workshop for the zither players, and then on the 4th day there will be a concert. We're not sure how many we're going to get, but we're looking probably at a minimum number of 30 zither players from across the United States coming to play, and our group will be playing with them. I'd like to relate a little bit of a story to you. On a cold Christmas Eve in 1818, Pastor Joseph Moore walked 3 kilometers from his home in the Austrian village of Obendorf to visit his friend Franz Gruber in the neighboring town of Arnsdorf. Joseph brought with him a poem he had written 2 years previously. Joseph desperately needed a carol for the Christmas Eve Mass that he was going to perform for the citizens. Joseph hoped that his friend, a school teacher and a church choir master, could set the poem to music, and they only had a matter of a couple hours to do so. Well, Franz Gruber accomplished that. He set the words to music, wrote the melody. Because the church organ had been damaged by a flood, they could not use the organ, so he set it to music using a guitar. It took decades for that song to become the worldwide classic it is today. Around 1832, several notes were changed within the melody to the point that we have it today. The first known performance of the song in the United States took place near New York City in 1839. It was sung in German. In 1863, an Episcopal priest, John Freeman Young, translated the song into English, and it is his version that is found throughout the English-speaking world. Over time, the words of the song has been translated into over 140 languages. But the melody of the song, Silent Night, is the same. The original German version of Silent Night had 6 verses. The English version only has 3. On your table, you should find a card there that on one side has a short history of Franz Schwarzer. On the other side, you'll see Silent Night. At the top, I believe you'll see that it's in German. The second one on the page is an attempt at a phonetic use of German, and I'm sure that probably more than half of you in this audience with your German heritage can probably ignore that and sing it in German. I believe the third version actually tells you what the words were in the original German before it was translated into English, and then in the final it has the English version as we know it. What we'd like to do for tonight is to play Silent Night. We'll play it 3 times. The first time it will be just the musicians by themselves. The second time we're going to ask you to sing it in German along with them, doing the best job that you can. And then the third time we'll sing it in English. So if you're ready, let's have Silent Night. you. Your voices were wonderful. I would like to thank the musicians, and particularly our 8 local zither players. They have come a long ways. I'm very proud of them.